Okay. Okay. I'll be right back.
All right. Good job. All right. I'm going to let a couple more folks in here. Let's give them just a second to pop on. And then we are going to get started. Jim is going to start dinner. He's listening in. He'll be back with us. Greetings tonight, everybody. Welcome to the Monday Night Young Entrepreneurs Call. This is Veterans Day 2024. I'm kind of excited about that for a couple of reasons. You'll see it's going to tie into tonight's topic a little bit. I don't know if we've got, are there any other veterans? Alex, Jim, either of you veterans in your family? All right, well, in the family, yes, there we go. So be sure and thank them for me as well. None of us gets here by accident. It's always on purpose on someone's part. So tonight's talk is creating clones. And this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart for a couple of reasons. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to tell you a story. We're going to wrap some things around it. And then I'm going to give you 8 points to write down at the end on how you can create clones. So what I mean by creating clones is this. Creating clones is what I refer to as the art of duplication. If you could have 2 of you, 3 of you, one of you while you're doing your marketing work, one of you while you're at work, one of you doing your stuff at home, one of you doing the research and the reading and the ideas. If you could duplicate yourself in your own efforts, where would you spend that extra time? Where would you send that other you to? And it's when you get into hiring other people, when you get into creating organizations, you want to make sure that you're finding people that can duplicate what you would do and the way you would do it. And I know artisans, for example, there's no way I could do what my dad used to do. He was a carpenter. He was a finished carpenter as well as a contractor, construction worker. So he could do tough work, grunt work, rough work, but he could also do the fine work, the finishing things off. And I'm not that detailed guy. I'll get things ramrodded. I'll do the grunt work for you. You don't want me doing the fine work. The fine work, I'm not a surgeon. All right. I'll get in there and scrub up and do the other stuff. So I know where my talents lie. So when you're duplicating, you want to find people to duplicate areas that you're weak, as well as duplicating your strengths that can take over when you're gone. Right. And I did this. How's your business going to carry on when you're away? Right. When the boss is away, what's going to happen? When you're away, what's going to happen? If you're incapacitated, if you retire, what's going to happen? You have to set up duplication in your whole business model. It doesn't just happen at the end or in your business plan when you're writing stuff up. How you conduct yourself, how you conduct business, who you surround yourself with is all part of creating a clone. Okay? So here's my first quote. We're going to start off with this. This is my own quote, by the way. So I'm going to give myself credit for this one. Entrepreneurship exposes your flaws, bad habits, and fears. You only get to make what you are. So think about that. You only get to make what it is that you are. So we can always work on things. We can move things forward. We can change. We can grow. But ultimately, it's on you. And nothing exposes your business. When people look at your business, they're looking at you, right? So there's no one to blame if there's a problem. If there's a flaw in the systems, if there's a flaw in your marketing and your messaging, it really is on you. So that one is that. So I've already did my happy Veterans Day. So I'm going to change gears real quick. I was just going to tell you that Taylor, who's on tonight, and Riley Kuntz, who's not on tonight, but will be listening to the recording. They were at an event where they were showcasing their product and actually selling, making contacts, clients, doing some marketing. And I thought about this. I was reading a different book. I won't even tell you what book I'm reading because I'm on the 4th of a series, and it's pretty in depth. It's on string theory and quantum physics, and don't ask me why my mind entertains that stuff, but I do. It's one of my other talents. And while I'm reading about some chaos theory and quantum mechanics, I couldn't help but make a correlation between that and what these two entrepreneurs were doing at this marketing event. And it's a merger of creativity and the imagination. And so when you're surrounding yourself with other creative people, with other like-minded people, there is a synergy that happens. It's the butterfly effect of consciousness, right? So just being out there, being in the room, being in those places that we say it all the time, get comfortable being uncomfortable. But there is something that happens there. And reading this chaos theory and quantum mechanics, it just all tied into business for me today. It really did. And as a result, it almost shocked me when I thought about tonight's topic, number one, and the direction it's going and the fact that it's happening on Veterans Day. A whole bunch of things came together. So you're going to get a message that I think is part of the whole quantum field. All right. There's some string theory action going on here in the universe, and you're going to get some of it tonight. So I just finished last week this book right here. It's probably reversed in your screen. It's Crisis of Command by former Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller. And anybody familiar? Little hands up if you're familiar. All right, so we're all familiar with the Afghan withdrawal. All right, and we left billions of dollars worth of equipment behind, a big fiasco. And I assume that most of you, like me, wanted some accountability for that. Well, only one person was ever jailed, court-martialed, lost his retirement, and it was the guy who was the whistleblower for the whole event. That's why it's a former lieutenant colonel. He can't be retired. He's 17 years in the United States Marine Corps, lieutenant colonel, and he called out his bosses, all right, the generals who screwed this whole thing up. And he went into great detail on how they did it, why they did it, and it's pretty damning. But rather than take what this gentleman said to heart and try and make some changes, they questioned his mental health and they kicked him out. No retirement benefits. It cost him his marriage. It cost him his career. It cost him everything to stand up and say, this was wrong and people need to be held accountable. People in the his chain of command needed to be held accountable. And so it's really a very heroic story. It's shameful. But there were several quotes in here that, and I'm going to tie this all together. So we're going to go through some of the quotes that came in here and think about business, because when I'm talking about duplication, and I put it in the text tonight, the biggest clone makers we have are education, right? We send our kids off so that they can think like us, become like us. In fact, the education systems, they're still teaching education the way they were 100 years ago. Not much has changed, okay? We've got computers now, but not much has changed. So we are literally making clones of ourselves, our ideas, our society. They do it in China too. They do it in North Korea. They do it in Russia. Education is a clone-making machine. It's how they duplicate. And the other thing is business, of course. We want to duplicate in our businesses because, that's franchising, right? You duplicate, you duplicate success. But the military, and that's what I want to talk to you about on Veterans Day here, is a clone-making machine. When you go into the military, everybody goes in, everybody's different, everybody's unique, everybody has their own style. You go in, the first thing they do is they strip you down, they shave your heads, everybody is the same. You get the same uniform, you start off the same, the training's the same, and you go up through the ranks the same. Every single person is rubber stamped, just like the cartoons where you're just duck stamping, and a duck comes out and another one and another one. And so the military is a great cloning machine. And if it's broken, you're going to be cloning broken parts. And that's what we have with Crisis of Command. So some of these quotes, now think about this from a business perspective. So his commanding officer, what happened with Lieutenant Colonel Scheller is he knew that the only way he could make any change was to go public. And so what he did was he went online, YouTube, Facebook, and he literally recorded a video calling out the generals that were in charge of this fiasco of an operation. He called them all out, including politicians. He called them out. Well, in the military, you can't do that. So he knew he was breaking the military rules, Uniform Code of Military Justice, and he was willing to be held account for that. He knew what he was doing because there was no other way to call the people out. So his commanding officer calls him in the very next morning, and this thing went viral overnight. Viral. His commanding officer called him in. He said, "What did you hope to accomplish by doing this, by breaking the rules?" And here's his quote. He said, "I was trying to start a discussion of accountability with our senior leaders. They are failing and no one is addressing it. I want generals held accountable. I want someone to address them in the same manner you are talking to me now." That's all he wanted. He was willing to be held accountable for what he did, but he wanted the same action going up chain. Well, part of his assessment in this book is he said generals don't understand technology. Okay, you think about this, the generation, they're older than me, right? Generals don't understand tech, so they stay clear of it, and they would rather deal with outdated and obsolete equipment rather than change and learn new things. And it's costing lives. And this is his quote, "There isn't a business in the world that could function on that many levels of ineptitude." Think about that. And when you think about what happened over there, that's so many levels of ineptitude. There's not a business, he's right, that would survive. And this is the business of war. This is the business of protecting our country, our nation, right? Our citizens, you and I. So the lesson I got out of that, and he gives several examples, including people who have died in outdated equipment because generals were not willing to do upgrades because they didn't understand what it was going to take to do it. Several examples. If you want them, read the book. But I've seen it. I've been in the military. I've seen it. I saw it 40 years ago, and it's still happening today. So then the next thing is, again, we're in accountability here. He said they try to maintain strength. This is the military upper echelon. They try to maintain strength through the status quo. The status quo in the military is yes men. I don't know if you all know that, but if you're a brown noser, you're a butt kisser, that's how you go up the ranks. You don't do it by making waves. You don't do it by being the entrepreneurial spirit in the military. It's just the opposite, okay? He said, so to try to maintain strength through the status quo instead of changing at a pace required to maintain a competitive advantage. And this is the challenge for any business people out there, whether you're working for someone else or working for yourself. How do you change at a pace that's required to maintain a competitive advantage? And that should be in our military, and it should be at the top of all of our minds as entrepreneurs. In the current military bureaucracy, promotion is not synonymous with the necessary ideals of militaristic command. Ultimately, we have people in critical leadership positions making egregious errors because they simply are not prepared for the job. Accountability doesn't solve problems, but it does start course correction. Okay? Now, I want to back up here for just a second because I know that there are other members of the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate that have family members, close family members in the military, and even one going to West Point. Shout out for Heidi and go Army at West Point. That doesn't change what the system is currently doing. I still have the greatest respect for anyone wearing the uniform and who's in service. I do. But that doesn't mean I'm going to look the other way when things are bad and when things need changed. And highly recommend, this book ought to be part of course curriculum in all military schools for officer training, in fact. So that being said, knowing what you're going into and knowing what you're up against is critical in business and especially in the military. And here's a quote that comes right from the book. I think it's awesome. The path to mediocrity is continually refined within the broken systems. And we're going to talk about systems in a little bit. So that's important. If you've got broken systems, you're just going to be refining, you're going to be duplicating, you're going to be cloning broken systems. So you've got to, if you want to get ahead, you've got to look at where your systems are weak, where the systems are broken, whatever it is you're doing. I don't care if it's an oil change, right? And I've worked around some expensive car shops where I've watched people go out and they've forgot to put the drain plug back in, and the customer's driving out and there's a stream of oil. I have seen people literally drive off after tire rotations and the tires are wobbling because somebody failed to, tighten all the lug nuts on one side, on one wheel. That's a broken system. Okay. You can't have that. So whatever your systems are, you have to be able to do it, right? You've got to be able to, do an honest assessment of the systems. But the path to mediocrity continually refined within the broken systems. Great quote. So the last thing I'm going to say is when people don't like what they're hearing, and in this case, they literally said, well, he's crazy, right? Rather than take accountability, they tried to tell Lieutenant Colonel Scheller he was crazy. You need a mental health evaluation. And I love the way he just called him out on this. This is what he said. When they don't want to hear the truth, they call you crazy. And this is what he told his commanding officer. He said, the Marine Corps never made me get a mental health evaluation when I missed the birth of my son, when I came home from combat deployments, or after I killed people. Only when I questioned leadership. What does that tell you? You think about that. We have to be able to take criticism also without calling the other people crazy. I mean, this is a two-way street. So the lesson here isn't just going one way. It's going up and it's going down. All right. But we've got to be able to question leadership, and we've got to be able to question our own leadership. So that leads me to my next point, business. I don't know about you guys, but I think Elon Musk probably has it dialed in. He's on track to be the first trillionaire. All right. So when Elon Musk says something, I'm like the E.F. Hutton of years ago, I'm going to listen. So he was talking about how he interviews people. He says, I only have two questions when someone's interviewing for my company. Doesn't matter if it's SpaceX or when it was PayPal back in the day. He has two questions. The first question is this. Tell me the story of your life and decisions you made along the way and why you made them. How's that for an interview question? Tell me the story of your life and decisions you made along the way and why you made those decisions. Number two was, what was the most difficult problem you worked on and how did you solve it? That's it. Those are his two interview questions. He doesn't care about degrees. He doesn't care about how far up the chain of command you worked at one company or another company or anything else. Those two questions define the people he wants to surround himself with. So great learning curve there. And this is the other thing. Welcome aboard, Kevin. Nice to see you in. So we are talking about the art of duplication and creating clones. You'll have to catch up on the first half later, but glad to see you here. So again, Elon Musk says, tell me the story of your life and decisions you made along the way and why you made them. And this gets me back to, I thought about that. When I heard that, I thought, what is a decision I made in my life and why did I make it? And it gets right back to crisis of command. So quick story here. When I was in, I went to college late. I joined the military, the Montana Army National Guard. And I was in the Guard for a year and a half before I ever went to college. I wasn't going to go to college, and it was a fluke, but I ended up going to college, and they said, well, shoot, you should be in the ROTC program, right? Because you're considered prior service, and you can go in as a junior. And I thought, well, okay. It had $100 a month stipend, and I had to teach classes. I had to teach drill and ceremonies and physical fitness and snowshoeing and rappelling, and so there was stuff involved, for that $100 a month. But I said, well, it sounds like a good idea. Well, The end result of ROTC, if you don't know, Reserve Officer Training Corps, is to groom and produce officers for today's military. So you can either go to military academies like West Point, and I actually had a senatorial offer for a referral to West Point that I turned down because I didn't think I was going to go to college. That's how stupid I was. But I did turn down a West Point thing. And then a couple of years later, here I am. I end up in college in an ROTC program. And keep in mind now, I've spent almost 2 years working with non-commissioned officers, almost every one of them Vietnam survivors. All right. They did combat tours, several of them in Vietnam. Those were my mentors in the military. Non-commissioned officers, frontline people who did the dirty work. And that's where I was groomed. And I also got to see the officers that were coming in to the command that hadn't been through that were now the leaders of these men who have been battle tested. And there was a big disconnect for me. So I went through a year and a half of ROTC training. I went to their advanced summer camp, and some of you may know this part of the story. I came out #1 and got the National Platoon Leadership Award, distinguished military student. I was the top dog. I could have written my own ticket anywhere in the Army. I could have done whatever I wanted, and I was on the fast track to be, a lieutenant colonel. Okay. And this was that life decision I made along the way. I refused to take the commission. Before my senior year, that I was going to be commissioned as a second lieutenant and get orders for active duty. And I said, I'm not going to do it. I already had a contract with the Montana National Guard for 6 years. I was almost 3 years into it. Well, 2 years into it by then when I ROTC. By the time it was done, they boarded me. First person boarded since the Vietnam War in the Army, like for desertion or something, because I refused to take a commission. So they boarded me. And so I'm sitting in a room, several military officers in front of me at a table. I'm there, I'm on the witness stand. They say, why won't you take your commission? And I said, gentlemen, I said, it would give me greater joy and more satisfaction to rise through the ranks of the non-commissioned corps and be a command sergeant major than to be the general of the Army. That would mean more to me based on, my understanding of the military. And it pissed them off. They did not like to hear that. But I knew something. I already knew in that short amount of time, based on my own intuition, my own gut, what 17 years, it took Lieutenant Colonel Scheller 17 years to figure out. I already knew it then. The leadership was not functional, and I didn't want any part of it. I didn't like the people that were being trained to be officers. That they were mediocre at best, and these were the people who were going to be leading people out there. I saw that that it was just liberal college pumping out liberal officers, and they didn't have a clue about work ethics and things that I had grown up with. There was a total disconnect, and I said, I'm not going to do it. Well, the outcome of that board hearing was I had orders to report to active duty. I was an E5, a Sergeant E5, at my lowest enlisted rank. So they were busting me down to an E1 and sending me into active duty as an infantryman for 2 years. So I got a lawyer. And while I'm in college, going through my regular college courses and stuff, I've also got an ongoing legal battle with the United States Army that took 2 years to resolve. And finally, the general of the Montana Army National Guard and the governor of Montana stepped up and they said, hey, this guy signed a contract with us first. We've got him for another, at that point, 2 more years, because I'd been in for 4 years at that point. And that contract supersedes the contract that you had with him. And they said, well, we paid him $100 a month. I said, I'll pay it back. It was 18 months of, okay, that's easy money. That's $1,800. I'll pay it back. I said, in fact, I might send you a bill for all the classes I taught for you, and that didn't make him happy either. So that's entrepreneurial spirit though. And so is that something I'm proud of? Yes, it is. And I didn't understand when I'm reading this book and I'm looking at all of the crisis of command that's going on that led to that fiasco in Afghanistan. I looked at my wife and I said, this is everything that I saw when I was a 20-year-old kid. Well, at that point, I was 22. I already saw that in the leadership and in the structures and the systems, and I knew I couldn't function in that system. And so I opted out, and it was a battle to opt out. So that's a huge, huge thing. But understanding what's wrong in the systems and what that can do for your career, my life choice has changed. I still finished up not only 6 years with the National Guard, I enlisted for another year up following. I was in Hawaii, so why wouldn't you, right? So I actually spent 7 years. So I 6 years plus another extension. So I did my time and I gladly served, and I served with some of the best people I've ever met. But not many great officers. Not many great officers. I can count on one hand with fingers left over how many good officers compared to NCOs that could have done the jobs of those officers. It's a damning assessment. So anyway, that was a blink moment for me. That's the gut check. Sometimes you just got to trust your gut. I didn't know all the reasons why I was not taking that commission then. I just knew it didn't fit. I knew it didn't fit. But I know now, 40 plus years later, why. And this is why. This man's life was destroyed. He's bouncing back, but I didn't go to, I avoided that one. So let's move on. That's a story that should bring it all into focus for you. So what do? Leadership qualities are what we're looking at here, and the art of duplication. So number one, how are you going to duplicate yourself? Number one, self-assessment. Take an honest look. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Know what they are and be honest about it. In line with that, couple of bullet points. Forgive yourself. No one said you had to be perfect. If you had ADHD, I work with a guy now that had ADHD and OCD, and he talked about how he was medicated his whole elementary, junior high, and high school career, and he's absolutely fine today. He's terrific. So forgive yourself. Work with what you have. Implement one thing until you are really good at it. I don't care what that is. If you're starting a new business, implement one thing until you are really good at it. Borrow other people's confidence. And know this, it's 90% mental and only 10% skill. Those are my life lessons, by the way. Number two, align with the right people. This gets to what we preach here all the time on the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate, and that's aligning with the right people, and it's all about values. What are the values? My values aligned with non-commissioned officers and people who were battle-tested and served and were willing to do the hard work, not just the desk work and the theoretical work. And I've always said, if you've got a problem in your business, it's because you hired wrong or you trained wrong. Hiring wrong is about values. Training is about you. If you want duplication, you're going to have to train them properly. If they're not trained properly, again, it's on you. Number three, develop systems. You just saw where I've talked about systems that are broken and how can they fail. You develop a system, you better be modifying it, tweaking it all along the way. Develop systems, and not just systems that work for you. Develop systems that work for those around you. If it's training systems, you can't just train one way. Everybody learns differently. So you better develop a training system that works for other people's learning styles, not just one. There's no one size fit all in entrepreneurship. There never has been, there never is. So develop systems that work for everyone, especially those that you're bringing up to take over when you're not there. Number four, find and establish relation connection points. And all that means is be authentic and vulnerable. Let me tell you what, when I was being authentic and vulnerable with five or six, I don't even remember, officers, high ranking, these were colonels and up, boarding me. All I could do was be authentic, and I felt very vulnerable. They had my life literally in their hands, but you find the connection points that work and deal with it. That's it. You don't have to be fake. You don't have to make it up. Number 5, mentor everyone, not just your managers, not just the people you like. And know this, people will do half of what you do. Just know that going into it. If you're only going to get half of what it is you would do with the job, be accepting of that, but mentor them to do more. Be a great mentor, and to everyone. Number 6, create leaders. You're not just creating managers, you need to create leaders. If you're going to be on an extended leave, might be a medical emergency, might be a family emergency, you might have to leave the reins to somebody else for an extended period of time. You better have, you better have leaders. So this is how you develop leaders. Give them independence. Empower them. If it's your kids and they're helping you with your business, empower them. Give them tasks to do. Make them problem solvers. Number 2, let them know it's okay to fail. Your employees, your staff, people around you need to know that you're okay with them failing. Number 3, develop consistency. They just need to be consistent. They better show up to work on time every day. They better do their job consistently every day. They better be on it if they're answering the phones and those are your customers on the other end of that phone, they better be consistent with how they take care of every single one of them. Develop that consistency. That's how you create leaders. Number 4, have a big vision and share it with all your people. A leader can't lead if they don't see the big picture, or they'll leave it all behind. Back to Afghanistan. Okay, you got to see the big picture here, and you have to share that vision. Number 5, create activity. Energy creates energy, and that creates momentum. And it gets back to my quantum physics and my string theory at the beginning of this talk. Activity breeds activity. It just does. And magic happens. It's where the magic happens. It's where creativity comes, your imagination is flourishing, the juices are flowing, and you make connections. You will find that like-minded people will come to you. They gravitate toward you. That will always happen. And lastly, number 7, and I've always been a favor of this, and I want you to think about it in the long term, or if you're even working for someone else, see if you've got a way to make things work in that direction. Profit sharing, ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, employee-owned companies. Give people a stake in what they spend their lives doing. Not just working for the man. They need to be working for themselves. They need to be working for that end. And seeing how we had an Elon Musk thing here, somebody was bashing Elon Musk for he had asked his people to take a 10% pay cut. Yeah, Jim, you're nodding your head. You're familiar with this. If I get it wrong, correct me, please. He asked his people to take a 10% pay cut for a whole year, I believe it was, so he could, realign his business. I think it was SpaceX. Please say, ask his employees, cut your salary 10% and ride this out with me. And there were haters out there saying, look at him. And then he made all these millions and hundreds of millions of dollars on the backs of these people. And Elon Musk responded. He said, they all get stock options. All those employees that took a 10% pay cut got stock options. So when he made all those extra hundreds of millions of dollars, he made them all rich. I'm telling you, people will sacrifice if they see the big vision and if they have a stake in it. So find ways in your own business, in your own whatever it is you're doing, or if you're working for someone else, see if there can't be some create. You never know. You might be that little drop in the bucket that drops a hint. And then the next CEO says, yeah, let's do something like that. And it might not be for you. It might be for the next generation of employees that come. You know, plant trees that someone else gets to sit in the shade with, right? So do what you can where you can. You know, bloom where you're planted, but make sure you're trying to cultivate leaders. Do things intentionally. So lastly, I'm going to end with a quote. And I heard this somewhere, and I don't remember. I can't credit who I got it from. It was in one of my old notebooks. But it's this: if you don't forget where you've come from, you will never get lost where you're going. If you don't forget where you've come from, you will never get lost where you're going. And I have to say, wrapping it all up, tying all these loose ends together, I was a kid who came from lower middle class, hardworking parents, scraping by a lot of times, but I knew how to work, and I knew who I wanted to work for and what I was willing to do for people I respected and admired. And that was everything, including giving my life for them. I would do anything and everything because that's where I came from. And all these years later, even making some huge decisions that could have cost me dearly, I never got lost. I didn't understand all of it. I didn't see how it all tied together, but I never got lost. And that's what I want for all of you. Every member in this syndicate, remember where you've come from, and you'll never get lost where you're going. I'm going to end it there. Jim, you wanted to weigh in tonight, so I'm going to put you up first, Mr. Jim Riley.
Thank you.
Go ahead and unmute and tell me what you think.
Great topic. Well done. I'm on daddy duty, so I'm going to weigh in and go back to finish feeding my kids. But Rod, I love the conversation. I love the topic because we often forget the importance of systems, duplication, creating, and having methods. And, your story about the military was par for the course, right? If it wasn't leadership's idea, then they're not going to change, and it's always going to be done the same way, even at a cost, right? And hopefully they'll fix that eventually, I pray. But I was thinking about a relevant story in my career with In-N-Out Burger. People know the company, they know their success, family owned, worth $30 billion, growth, across the country now. But it wasn't always that way. From 1948, when they were established, into the early 80s, they had a plan, but they were outgrowing and outpacing the plan. And the owner's son, Rich Schneider, who had taken over the company when the owner passed away, he decided he was going to put a new plan in place. And that was really against the system that he'd grown up with. But instead of just cloning what had been done, he created something that would survive the test of time. And as an example of what that looked like is Rich came to the company managers. There was 28 at the time. Please note that managers were paid based on the profitability of the stores. So if the store wasn't profitable, they weren't going to get a bonus. And so Rich went to all the store managers, all 28 of them, and said, look, we're going to change the way we're doing things. We're not just going to clone what's happened in the past. We're going to hire and strive to have the best people in the business. In order to do that, we're going to increase our minimum wage. At the time, minimum wage was $2.95 an hour. They jumped up their minimum wage to $6 an hour, almost double. All the managers practically had a heart attack because they thought, well, there goes my labor costs out the window. I'm not going to get a bonus. And Rich said, I promise you, within a year, we will have one of the most successful restaurant chains in the country. And it happened. And what you see today is a result of that. And that wasn't a result of just cloning what had always been done. It was a result of taking what worked well, keeping that, but finding systems to constantly improve that and make it better and better and better. And then teaching what that, the meaning behind that betterment. So I think the military could take a lesson from In-N-Out in terms of how to listen to their people and be better and become the best again. And so I love the topic. I love that you're putting it on the forefront for all of us to think about. Even in my really brief real estate career, of a couple months, I'm already adding systems in place to duplicate my efforts. Photographer, when we have a listing that will take the photos, so I don't have to do it, they can do it better. A transaction coordinator to do all the paperwork so that I can be more efficient in the things that I need to be doing. So putting systems in place so I can duplicate what I do, and not just repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, thinking about ways to do it better, even in an early business. So I love the thought. I love the topic. Thanks for talking about it tonight. And I'm going to go back off camera, but thank you so much for talking about it, Ryan.
You got it. Thanks, Jim. All right. Taylor, you put some fire out there. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I know you've got a whole bunch of things going on. I think you guys are butchering an elk tonight. So take yourself off mute. And again, this is the wife of a veteran. So I know the sacrifices you've made as well and continue to make as the wife of a service member. So I appreciate that, and thank your husband for us tonight.
Thank you. I will pass it along, certainly. Can you remind me what your number 6 on the list was?
Yes, number 6 is create leaders.
Oh.
And then
Nice.
there were several bullet points after that, which was independence, empower people, problem solvers, consistent,
Okay.
big vision, and create activity.
Okay.
That help?
Yes, thank you. I can't remember at what point I sent the fire, but it was really good, whatever it was.
Well, good. When you rewatch it, you'll know what it was, right? It'll hit
That's
you
right.
again.
Yeah, I'll rewatch. Something else on the list. Did you ask me a question? I'm trying to.
Well, I wanted to know what was on your mind when you were thinking fire, but I'll ask you this question. I know the story of your life. What was the decision you made along the way, and why did you make it? I can think of several because I know you pretty well.
Yeah. Geez, I'm just trying to think of a decision that is good to share. I think that I'll make it a little more broad. I had kids fairly young. I mean, we had been married 3 years, but I had my first daughter, my only daughter, at 21. And I'll say this, I was raised, thank you, in a pretty unconventional way. We did things differently than most families did. And that is something that I have grown to appreciate more and more the older I've gotten. Our family has dealt with certain health situations since I was married. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. And early on, when I was young, I was a young mom, I still made certain decisions based on my own personal convictions as it pertained to my children's health. But I was scared and I was constantly worried about it. And I was thinking like, oh my word, like someone's going to take my kids away if I make the wrong decision, or I was just full of fear. But I never stopped educating myself because I knew that if I'm going to make a decision, I have to be able, I'm going to be held account for that decision. And me only, especially as it pertains to my family and my kids. And I think just being in the habit of going against the grain and asking hard questions, even when it's not the norm, even when it's not what everybody else is doing, has empowered me in ways that I never would have imagined. And I'm at the point now where I have full confidence in the decisions I make for my children. And I am not afraid to talk to somebody about it. I'm not afraid to talk to someone who others would consider a leader about it, because I know that I'm doing what's right for myself and my family. And that's something that has empowered me in business. Just being able to live according to my values and not according to what the rest of the world wants me to do. It's empowered me in politics, in my voting. So yeah, I'm thankful, and I can't take any credit for that, but just being raised in an environment where we were challenged to think critically about every decision that we made, and to ask questions that other people are not asking. So yeah, I'm thankful for that.
That's awesome, Taylor. Thanks. I could give all kinds of examples, but it gets back to that entrepreneurial spirit, doing things differently. That's what entrepreneurs do. They're willing to take that extra risk. Everybody else might be okay to go to work every day, 9 to 5, but you're the one who's saying, no, I want my own business. I'm going to start something on the side. I'm going to take my hobby and turn it into a career, like racing. Right. So yeah, those little decisions add up, and they build confidence. They really do. I can remember, Taylor, when you were afraid to pick up the phone to call an employer to say you needed to quit your job, and they wouldn't let you quit. It's like, no, you have to make this, you do it. A parent's not going to step in and do it for you. So now look at you get up and speak at school board meetings and county commissioner meetings and write letters to the editor. Think about how far that little trail of entrepreneurial spirit goes. It permeates your life.
And not only that, but it turns every negative situation. I was actually just thinking about that today, because that was my very first job, my very first tax-paying job that I ever had. When you guys finally said, like, you need to do what you said you were going to do. You need to fire him. And what a negative, terrible, awful experience that was, and how the way that they treated me. And looking back, there are things I would have done differently now that I'm a full-grown adult. But those experiences also shaped who I am today. So I think just sticking it out and holding fast to your convictions and your values and what is right for you and your people, it is fruitful, but it also turns the negative experiences into something beautiful.
Great point. Great point. Thanks. Alex, you want to weigh in on this tonight?
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you for your service again, Rod.
It was my pleasure.
It's very interesting what you were saying about the difference between non-com and commissioned officers. And I was not in the military. I came from both grandparents were in the military. My father-in-law was in Vietnam, and got some really cool stories one day I'll have to talk about. But when I was working in the government sector at a company that I know, one day when we bought another company, everybody was introduced as to what they did in the military. I just said that I was a Boy Scout. That was as close as I got. I always worked better and looked up to the non-commissioned officers more than I did the lieutenant colonels and colonels and everything else. And you could see a gigantic difference in the way that they handled themselves, carried themselves, and led from the top down as well as the bottom up. Mm-hmm. And it was just night and day difference. And yeah, it's amazing. It's so to I guess to add concrete to what you're talking about tonight, from a person who was not in the military, I could give a little bit of evidence to that, and confirming that theory or that thought process.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not bashing the officer corps, the officer cadre.
Right.
There obviously are some good officers out there, but a lot of them are a product of a broken system. And that it's their thinking and mentality when it comes to leadership that I know is broken. So,
Mhm.
I mean, again, from
Right.
someone working in that system, I can still respect them as people and human beings, and I can respect their rank in the system. But it doesn't mean that I agree with how they were trained and how they operate their commands. And that's the
Exactly.
difference. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that change is going to be slow coming. It really will be a slow turning that, an aircraft carrier in the Mississippi. It's going to be a slow change, but it's one as business people we need to recognize, because business doesn't have the impediments that a military operation does or that any government operation does. Business can move quicker. And it still can take, the larger the business, the longer the change, but it doesn't mean that it can't be fixed quicker. So thanks for that. I appreciate it, Alex. And you're absolutely right. I could write another book on just that, and the reasons why, from a psychological and sociological and a training aspect, and all of them.
And it's not necessarily the military side too. I mean, I worked with I ran the GSA program at the company, and we bid on millions and millions and millions of dollars in contracts, and just the mentality of the GSA and having to discount stuff but then pay the money on things that you've discounted, but it has and their thought processes. And I remember I had this argument with my GSA contracting officer one day. And, for those of you familiar, you pay what's called the industrial funding fee, an IFF fee of 0.075% of every dollar you sell on the GSA schedule to the GSA. And I said, listen, I was sitting on my suitcase in the middle of Dallas Airport in the terminal trying to get a hold of this person and have them, finally make some sense. And I said, listen, the moment that I cut you a check, that makes me your customer. And as a customer, I'm not happy. And this is what you need to do to change this. And I'll never forget, she said to me straight right over the phone, I'm not your customer, or you're not my customer. And I said, well, the moment I pay you money, I am. She goes, you're not a customer. You're just another organization. And these are the rules. And I still have nightmares.
It's a broken system. So again, recognizing that, though, yeah, and the whole GSA is, you're right. It's the civilian branch of military.
Mhm.
They're partners. So yeah, we ran into that for sure. But well, Kevin, I'm going to thanks again, Alex. I appreciate that very much. Kevin, I know you came in a little bit late. Any takeaways tonight? We'll put you on spot. Unmute and give us a howdy do. Going once. Are you still there, Kevin?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to work it.
There you go. Looks like you got it. We can hear you.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how to turn the video on, but I'm just wrapping up some flooring in my house as I was listening.
Good for you. That's multitasking.
Yep. Yeah, I know I came in late for some reason. It wouldn't let me join. And I don't know what the heck was going on, but from the stuff that I did catch, I can chime in a little bit on the military portion of it. I myself was medically denied by the military when I was younger. My father, my grandfather were both Air Force. My son is actually in the Air Force. He's stationed in Ramstein at the moment. And
thanks for his service, Kevin.
Yes, absolutely. I could not be more proud of him. He is an amazing, amazing kid. Well, he's 22 now. I can't call him a kid much anymore. But he's an amazing man, and I'm very proud of him. But he had some struggles with some of the commanding officers in the past. And those are supposed to be the people you are able to go to if you have an issue, which he did at one point, and they turned it around him and tried to take his job away from him at one point. And it was very tough. So he is actually now part of a program that they start. Well, they didn't really start it for him, but they wanted him to advocate for it, that people can come forward and discuss certain things and do certain things, which he wasn't a huge fan of at first because of the way they fought him on it. But he made some deals with them. And he actually even got the base commander involved, and the base commander loves my son, and coined him when he first got there for the way that he handled himself at the front gate and did everything correct. And so, yeah, just like you said, it's a broken system. And when someone has an issue and they voice that issue, you're basically being punished for it.
Yeah. Well, and again, the lessons for all of us as business people are to learn from other people's mistakes. You know,
Yeah.
Jim always says you paid the stupid tax, or the dummy tax, so you don't have to. And the military has paid lots of dummy taxes. We've paid them to pay it.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, the takeaways are out there in real life. Everywhere we go, every place you shop, there's a takeaway. You know, every place you do business, there's a takeaway. So just be thinking about things from, again, the customer's point of view. Like Alex said, you know, once that check is cashed, you're a customer, you know, and it doesn't mean the customer's always right, but you better make it right, right? That doesn't
Exactly.
mean that it can't be made right. So always good stuff there for sure. And again, thanks to your son. And I know it's a sacrifice for a parent, an involved parent, to have a child, especially out of the nest, that far out of the nest.
Yeah,
but-
it was been some difficult times, but he's gotten through everything and came out better on the other side.
Absolutely. Fantastic. It was good to see you on. Just about 7 o'clock here. That was a lot to get through tonight. I appreciate everyone's input, and we'll see you next Monday night, and have a great week. Hit it hard.
Thanks, Rod.
You bet. Bye now. Jim, you might have to do that from the cloud. I'm not seeing that. I've got the recording. Hey, Jim. Well, thanks. This recording, usually it gives me the option to stop the recording and send it to the cloud. And it's I'm not seeing it there. When you turned over controls, that should have put it all in there. If I just end the whole thing.